Hey, welcome back to the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. I'm Joe Noga, joined by Paul Hoynes. Hoynesy, the Guardians continued their hot start to the second half of the season, taking the first of a four-game set against Baltimore at Progressive Field. 10-5 the score, but that score kind of skewed because of the big seventh inning that they had. It was a much closer game and wasn't really decided until that seventh inning, but some big home runs for the Guardians and really contributions up and down the lineup from the top to the bottom of the order helped get them through. And we saw some really big moments in that game, none the least of which was provided by José Ramírez in that first inning after Tanner Bybee had given up 3 runs in the top of the first. Jose steps up and does what pretty much everybody in the ballpark expected him to do when he climbed into the batter's box with the first 2 runners on base.
Yeah, it was a Jose Ramirez moment, Joe. 3-run homer to right field, gets him right back in the ball game, ties the score 3-3. It was his 20th home run of the season and made him, a 2020 guy for the 7th season, Joe, in his career, and that's a feat. That's not just one of those little milestones you reach in mid-August. This is something that, that puts them in the company of Barry and Bobby Bonds and a lot of really talented ball players.
Yeah, you mentioned those names, Barry and Bobby Bonds. Those guys have done it 10 times in their career. Jose's done it 7 times total in his career, 5 consecutive seasons. And really the only time he didn't do it after 2017, I'm sorry, after 2018 was the 2020 season that was truncated, that was a shortened regular season. And, if that season had been played out to its completion, I think, we'd be looking at a guy with 7 consecutive or 8 consecutive seasons of 2020 being the case. As it stands right now, he's got 7 that's tied with Eric Davis and Carlos Beltran, the only other switch hitter to do it. Bobby Abreu has 9 seasons of 20 home runs, 20 steals. And the only other player this season to achieve the feat in Major League Baseball is Pete Crow Armstrong. And the way they're talking about Pete Crow Armstrong, he's a guy who's, a name who's going to be an MVP finalist this year. So certainly, good company for Jose Ramirez to accomplish that. But really, when you think about that moment, like you said, it was a Jose Ramirez moment. And, we asked Bo Naylor, we asked Stephen Kwan after the game, are you guys expecting something like this when Jose steps into the box? And they talked about the confidence that he gives everybody in that dugout in a moment like that, because he wants to step into the box at that moment. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, that half the battle, I think, Joe's confidence in this game, maybe 3/4 of the battle. And Ramirez has never lacked that since he was a rookie. He has always had a firm belief in himself, and he likes those moments, Joe. Some guys might run away from that, but he likes being up there. He likes being the guy, and I've really seen him enjoy being the kind of the focal point of this club this year, more so than in a lot of years past.
Yeah, it was a good night for Jose. Just from that one swing, he moves. He's second now all time in franchise 20 home run seasons. The only he's got not what eight 20 home run seasons. The only Cleveland player with more 20 home run seasons in franchise history, obviously Jim Thome, the all-time home run leader. And we might not be able to say that for too many years, much longer, if Jose Ramirez continues on the trajectory that he's on.
Yeah, ptomaine poisoning's got to watch out because Jose's coming over his shoulder. It just depends. Jose has been so fortunate, knock on wood, when it comes to health. Really, the only really serious kind of injury I can remember is when he broke his hamate bone, in 2017, 18, so somewhere back, and that kind of knocked him out for 4 or 5 weeks. But he's been so fortunate, and he takes such good care of himself. And he's always playing the game at 100 miles an hour. Joe, Thome and him, very different ball players to me, type of ball players. Thome, the big guy at first base, home run hitter. Jose, kind of he does everything, across the board. And how about the way that game ended last night, Joe?
Yeah, that was an interesting way. he sort of starts things off for the Guardians with the big home run, and then he ends it with backwards flailing over the shoulder catch of a shallow pop in left field. That kind of catch is actually becoming sort of one of his signatures. He makes so many catches on balls in left field or balls down the third base line in foul territory, sort of tailing away from the pitcher, tailing away from the infield with his back to the infield. He's gotten really good at making that catch. Yesterday was just a little more theatrical. He catches it and then does a big back flop in the outfield. And you could tell he was sort of laughing about it when he made the catch, because everybody just sort of held their breath for a microsecond, not knowing if he had actually hurt himself or not.
Yeah, I thought Kwan's eyes were going to pop out of his head. Kwan had to pull up, and I think he was laughing when he saw Jose hit the ground.
Well, I'll tell you, if you make a catch that impresses Stephen Kwan, a 3-time Gold Glove winner out there in left field, then you're doing something right. And Jose certainly did last night. And the Guardians as a whole really did very well last night, even though they kind of didn't do very well at the plate last night. It was a weird offensive night. You and I were talking about this before we started recording. Usually when a team goes 3 for 20 with runners in scoring position, they're talking about how much they missed out, how many opportunities they missed out on. The Guardians walked 8 times last night. That tied a season high, but they only scored 10 runs. Usually if you walk 8 times, you expect to see that run total really climb.
Yeah, Joe, it was one of those weird games. They leave 15 guys on base, and another season high. They will go 3 for 20 with runners in scoring position, like you said, and they walked 8 times. And besides that, they finished with 14 hits, and they scored 10 runs. That they probably should have scored 20. So it was a strange game, but it just shows you the power of the 2-out hit or the 2-out RBI, and they had a bunch of those, and that's why they won the ball game.
Yeah, and Stephen Vogt did mention that last night that, hey, we probably should have scored 20 runs. He said that in his post-game comments. But I think he'll take that as a W, take the momentum that this team has really been able to carry over since they entered the All-Star break on a hot streak. Things have been going really well offensively, especially considering they've won 9 of 11 since that 10-game losing streak. In their last 10 games, they're 8-2. Detroit is 3-7 in that stretch, and they've cut some games down off of the Tigers' lead in the American League Central. And I don't know, how realistic looking at the Central Division title is right now for them, but they've gone from 14 to 10.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The thing that's going to be interesting, Joe, is how the front office reacts to this. If this role continues, if they continue to stay hot through, up until the deadline on July 1st, what does Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff do? Do they add? Do they subtract? Do they try to play the middle that they're so good at, threading the needle? Really, the more these guys win, the more pressure they put on the front office to improve this team.
Yeah, and make no mistake that this is 3 games remaining in this Orioles series. They could win all 3 and head to Kansas City with Colorado on the other side of that. That's a long stretch there where you could find some sustained winning, and they do have by record, the easiest schedule for the remainder of the season out of any team in Major League Baseball. 3.5 games back in the wild card race right now. Like you told me earlier, Tampa Bay, Texas, and Boston are in front of them. The Red Sox hold the 3rd wild card, but the Guardians play all 3 of them before the end of the season.
Yeah, so they've got a chance there. They've got a chance to control their own fate. It just depends where they are when they meet those 3 teams. Tampa Bay and Boston, they play in August. Early September. And Texas, they play at the end of August. So, mark those games, those series on your calendar. We'll see if they still hold the importance that they do today when those games come up on the schedule.
Yeah, the only thing that really sticks with me is something that Chris Antonetti said a couple weeks ago. And it was a theme that he's repeated over and over again over the last several trade deadlines in years past, is that, we're going to win and our success is going to be determined by the guys in that clubhouse. So that, that tells me that bringing somebody from the outside in to, an impactful player from the outside in probably isn't something that they're looking at doing. and they're relying on guys to sort of step forward who are already on the roster or who are already in the organization. And that might come as a disappointment to some people who want to see a lot of big moves and a lot of big trades. Maybe some reporters who wrote columns earlier this year saying that they should make bold moves. I don't know, might be disappointed by that, but I'm hoping that that's not the case, and that at least one name, one substantive player out there can make a difference for this club.
Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. And you've got a guy like Lane Thomas. That my mind keeps going back to that guy. I think he could be an influence on this club. He could make an impact. But we watched him yesterday limping around the locker room, and he did not look ready to play, Joe. He looks like he's coming around slowly from that plantar fasciitis. He's had a second shot in his foot, and that's a painful injury, and it takes a long time to recover from.
Yeah, the weird thing is Lane Thomas was the guy who did that last year for this club, especially in the postseason.
Yeah.
They did bring somebody in, and he was that impactful bat. So, it does work. They might just be one player away, one Lane Thomas away. Maybe that player is Lane Thomas, but getting him back to full strength and full speed is, yeah, like you said, critical there. But I want to take a look last night, especially at the contributions they got from guys who hadn't really, or at least one guy who hadn't really been doing much. That's Bo Naylor. He gets up his first at bat in the second inning, drives a ball off the right field wall, just barely misses a home run at that point, and later on in the game steps up, hits the big home run that basically gives the Guardians. I think he tied the score at the time with
Tied the
that home
score.
run. Tied the
Yeah.
score. So, this is a guy who they've sort of been waiting around all season for something to sort of click. And finally, last night, he has a couple of hits, snaps an 0 for 18 skid with that first single, and homers for the first time since June 9th.
Yeah, 66 at bats without a homer, Joe. When he went deep with 2 outs in the fifth there to tie the score for his 10th home run, Joe. I don't know what to make of Bo, really. Joe, I think this is a guy that Stephen Vogt tells us he's one of the best athletes on the team. Very, and we've seen that. We've seen that, when he's behind the plate. But we've also seen him struggle behind the plate. We've also seen him struggle at the plate. Just a guy who hasn't seemed to have been able to find it, whatever it is, for the last 2 seasons, season and a half, Joe. And I'm not sure what they do with him. I don't know. Is time running out on him? Or, do they bring another catcher in? Or do they stay with Bo? He's their number one pick. He's a hard worker, a good guy in a clubhouse. But sooner or later, you have to see some results here.
Is it worth asking the question? Does he miss having his brother in the clubhouse? I don't really think that that's a factor here, but it could be. It could be an emotional or mental sort of issue because physically he doesn't look like he's playing injured or being held back in any way. Mechanically, Stephen Vogt said that he did change something with his swing. Has been working with the hitting group, and maybe that sort of helped with the results last night. Could it be as simple as Big Brother isn't around anymore and he's sort of rudderless at the moment?
I don't know, Joe. He struggled last year when Josh was here. I think we're seeing the same Bo Naylor that we saw last year. To me, at least. And I like Bo. I don't want to get down on him. And there's still 2.5 months left to the season here, or at least 2 months left to the season. We'll see how he goes. But I know you and me were talking about this is a guy that has 20 home run potential before the start of the season. He's halfway there, but I think you have to see a little more consistency at the plate from him.
Yeah, third consecutive year with at least 10 home runs. That's the first Cleveland catcher to do that since Yan Gomes was here, and it's been a while. So, yeah, nice to see that. But again, there's more that needs to be unlocked there at the plate. They didn't just get him. They didn't just draft him with the idea that he would be a defense first catcher or just a backstop. They drafted him because he's got the hitting genes, he's got the bloodlines to be an impactful bat, and that's what they're expecting of him. And so far, the last 2 seasons, he just hadn't been delivering. And last night's result hopefully isn't the outlier. You also mentioned Hunter Gaddis coming back. He tossed a scoreless inning last night in relief. His first appearance back in a while after dealing with a wrist injury.
Yeah, he hadn't pitched since July 11th, Joe, that first game of the doubleheader against Chicago, the White Sox, just before that 4-game series before the break. He was pitching in the 8th inning, had a cramp in his forearm or his hand, and they shut him down, for 9 games. And he came back last night and pitched scoreless 8th inning. His first fastball was right around 97 miles an hour. So hopefully Gaddis is over the hurdle, over the hump, and he's ready to contribute to that bullpen on a consistent basis, as he's done all year and all last year. One of the most consistent performers on the team and in the American League as far as relief pitchers go.
Yeah, the nice thing is that the bullpen, the relievers, the guys that they lean on the most, we haven't really had to see them get overworked or overused over the last several weeks so far. It's funny, Hoynesy, last year at this time, all we talked about was how the starting rotation isn't holding up its end of the bargain with the bullpen that had been, lights out and the best in the league. And now that's just it's not that the bullpen isn't holding up its end, it has, but there's been sort of a reversal with the starting rotation. These guys are going 6, 7, 8+ innings each start, particularly on this homestand, but the rotation has been so good. That's why last night when we saw Tanner Bybee get knocked around early, but then he sort of picked himself up off the mat. Jose Ramirez's home run sort of, rechecked the boxes and reset everything. He went back out there and had said, "Hey, I'm going to get as deep as I can into this game." He winds up pitching through the 7th inning.
Yeah, listen to these inning totals, Joe. Since the Guardians coming out of the break, Ciccone 8 1/3 innings, Allen 5 1/3, Williams 7 innings, and Bybee 7 innings. I don't know if they ever had a stretch like that last season where consistently the starters put that in, got that deep into the games, and this has become a trend, Joe. Like a guy like Allen has reached the 6th inning 8 straight times. And he really struggled mightily last year. We really didn't see him in the second half. So he was at AAA. So this is a step forward by the rotation. These guys are all young. They're all 26, 27 years old. And hopefully you've got Shane Bieber coming back in the near future.
Yeah, and that's something we'll get to. We know when his next start will be, but I want to go back to something that Tanner Bybee said sort of after the start last night, and one of the keys that sort of relates to what you just said in terms of the starters getting deeper. This young rotation, all those guys that you mentioned, young, not too many years of experience in a major league rotation. They arrive up in the big leagues, and Bybee said all of us came up as pretty much high strikeout pitchers, guys who are used to blowing away minor league in the high minors in AAA and AA, getting high strikeout totals and not really worrying about how deep they go into games and how efficient they have to be. And some of them come to the major leagues and aren't equipped maybe with that third or fourth secondary pitch that they can throw to get weak contact when they're ahead 0-2 in the count. And instead of going after a punch out and nibbling and throwing, 4, 5, 6 pitches in an at bat, they can get an out on 3. We've seen Gavin Williams develop that cutter. We've seen Tanner Bybee work on his pitch mix as well. And it just sort of stuck in my brain how Bybee said, some of these young pitchers arrive in the big leagues expecting to strike a bunch of guys out and not realizing that if you're going to try and strike everybody out, you're going to be out of there by the 4th inning. You need those out pitches. You need those, the cutter or, a decent pitch with movement like a sinker to try and get these guys off your fastball, to try and get these guys to roll over or pop up. And that'll get you the 8th inning. That earns you that trip out there for the 9th, like Ciccone had the other day. And we're seeing that out of these guys right now.
Good point. Ciccone only had 2 strikeouts in 8 1/3 innings. He got some, he retired, I think, the first 12 guys he faced. A lot of ground balls, a lot of early outs. So he's doing exactly what you're talking about, Joe. Allen only had 4 strikeouts in 5 1/3. Now, Williams, was kind of the outlier there, 11 strikeouts, but he went to seven innings. So he was really efficient. You really have to be efficient when you do that. And Bybee, 4 strikeouts in 7 innings. So, yeah, I mean, Bybee is, kind of practicing what he preaches.
Yeah, give me a game where your starter only has 3 or 4 strikeouts, but he goes a stretch of 12 consecutive batters retired, and you know that the guy gets it. The young guy, something clicked, and he's in rhythm, and he's throwing pitches that the lineups can't, don't know what to do with once they're behind in the count. It makes it that much harder. You mentioned Shane Bieber. You mentioned Lake County tonight. The captains will run Shane Bieber out there. We're expecting to see 3 innings, around 40 to 45 pitches out of Bieber as he starts to make his progression towards a big league return.
Yeah, he made a start in the Arizona Complex League, and this is the follow-up to that. I'm sure the Guardians are excited. They'll have a lot of people there watching, and this is a big step for Bieber, Joe. Uh, does it really kind of sets the tone to when will he get back, and how much time he'll have when he gets back to help the Guardians and help himself, really. To reestablish his value on the trade market, maybe, or free agent market, if that he if he decides to opt out, or whatever it is. But this is a big start, a first, the second step to something. We'll have to see how the rest of the season unfolds.
Yeah, I keep thinking the fewer starts that Shane Bieber makes for the Guardians, like the later he arrives in the big leagues this year, and if he only gets to make a half dozen starts or whatever, I keep thinking that really ups the chances that maybe he does re-up and pick up that option year and come back for another season next year, just to sort of not only prove to Guardians fans that it was worth the wait, prove to himself a little bit of something. I think that could be a possibility, but you never know. The dollar signs and money speaks. We'll see how that goes. Before we get going, got to mention Sunday afternoon, Sunday morning, the president posted on one of his social media outlets about wanting to see the Guardians revert back to their former name of the Indians. He mentioned this along with the Washington Commanders. A lot of us saw it as maybe a distraction from other things that were going on in the country and regarding his administration. But let's just focus, instead of who sent the tweet, who sent the message, and whatever anybody's feelings are about that and the timing and why, let's focus on the idea itself. Hoynes, what do you think of the idea of the Guardians reversing course after these 4 years of playing under this particular nickname and going back to their former name that they held from 1905 to
1915.
1915
1915.
to 2021.
Joe, first of all, like you, I grew up in Cleveland. And I really, to me, when I was growing up in Cleveland, I had no problem with the Indians nickname. But I wasn't an American, a Native American. And the older I got, and the more I thought about it, I thought it was time for a change. I'm glad they made the change because I was tired of the constant conflict that the name caused. Every season, every home opener, it was always, the same old story. The Guardians the team, the organization made a move, made a decision. I think they should stick with it and just move forward. I hope there's no consideration about going back to the name, to the name Indians. I think it would be a mistake. I think, they've rebranded this franchise, move forward, take advantage of it, and let the controversy of the past, just stay in the past.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. One of the things that really stood out to me, back when, and we covered the whole transition and the whole name change and the whole process that this team went through to get to this point, and to really just sort of have a fresh outlook and a positive momentum moving forward with the name, as opposed to having to deal with, like you said, every year the protests and the issues that would pop up. To me, the reason that they went around and did this, it was also prompted by the players. I remember, a closed meeting that the players had with Paul Dolan and with stakeholders in this, that they said this is a change that we want to see made. And I believe 2020 season, the home opener, they didn't wear Indians across their chest. They wore their alternate jerseys that said Cleveland. I believe their road jerseys, their road blue jerseys they wore at home for the opener, and it not as sort of a protesting sort of thing, but saying, "Look, this is something that we want to see as a change," and they made it happen. They sort of forced uh, the the ownership's hand, whatever influences the league had at the time, in terms of removing Wahoo. You speculate about that as well, but this was a move that Paul Dolan has been on record saying that they wanted to do and they've wanted to do for a while. So it was made for the right reasons. I think at a time in the country when there was sort of unrest and uncertainty surrounding the George Floyd incident in Minnesota, it's something that the community can come together about as opposed to being divisive. Yeah, I think the whole thing it's been done for the right reasons. I think they should keep it in place. And like you said, to change it now and to go back, I think you would have to question and be suspicious of what motivations they would have for doing something like that.
Definitely, Joe. I mean, they made the decision, stick with it, move ahead, and try to, they changed it to better the social conscience of the city, to bring the city and the fan base together. Has it worked? Probably, I'm sure there's going to be fans that are going to take the Indians' nickname to their grave, and more power to them. I can understand that fully, but the organization made a decision. They've decided to go in a different direction. And, it's interesting that, when the change was made, I got so many emails saying, I'm never watching another Guardians game again. I'm never going to the ballpark again. And you look at the ballpark, Progressive Field this year, Joe, they've drawn more fans. I mean, they've drawn very, very well for a team that has a losing record. So I think time heals all wounds.
Yeah, and like you said, I think the attendance is up 16% over pre-COVID. I think the merchandise that they've sold with Guardians on it not only has looked really sharp, with the exception of the fastball logo, but there's a lot to be positive about. And like Chris Antonetti said when he was asked about this on Sunday afternoon, he said, "We made a decision. We're moving forward. Other people have other reasons for sort of bringing this up and making this an issue again, but that's not something that the organization is doing." And he can respect all sort of angles on that. So, and that's all I want to talk about it. We did so many podcasts, we did so much coverage of this name change when it happened, and now that it's 4 years in the rear view, to see it come back up again is just kind of, we've been there and done that. So, Hoynesy, let this be the last time for a while that we're talking about it.
Good deal.
All right, man. We'll check in again tomorrow with you on the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. We'll talk to you then.